Hello everybody, welcome to the Atheist Experience. We are live for what is evidently going to be the last live Atheist Experience in this studio for a little while. If I move my coffee cup, you can see today is May, well you could have seen that today is May 31st, 2009, except that they've put up this wonderful notice. The Channel Austin studio will be closed June, July, and August. You can still watch us live though. Check out our website for more information. Here's what's actually going to happen. They're going to be doing some renovation in the studios here. We mentioned it before. They're going to be updating equipment and re-outfitting studios. And then after that's done, there's going to be a period where they're going to have to retrain the producers on the new equipment. And as soon as that's done, we'll be back live on the air from this studio. But because even though this started as a local public access program, it's grown way beyond that, and it may be the case that we have more viewers outside of Austin than inside of Austin. I have no way of finding out. How many people are connected to the stream at the moment? Do we know? Is there a number? 350-ish? So that's how many people just tuned in to watch it live, and I doubt they're in Austin. Otherwise, they'd just be watching it on cable for the most part, unless they didn't have cable.
Right.
But what we're going to do is next weekend there will be no Atheist Experience at all. We're taking a week off to, relax and set up to use Dillahunty International Studios, the wonderful studio that we use for nonprofits, for Atheist Experience Ustream casts. So starting on the 14th of June, we are planning on streaming at our normal time, which is 4:30 Central. You can figure out the international clock stuff that you guys would normally have to do to watch the show. We are not sure whether or not we're actually going to be able to take live calls. We're talking about using something like Skype to do it. It's just going to have to, you're going to have to stay tuned and bear with us as we try to work this out and make things work as best we can. Might as well get the announcements out of the way. This is the Atheist Experience, and today we're live from Austin and streaming out on Ustream. It's a live public access television show. We take live calls while we're here and interact with the public and have discussions about all kinds of things, news events, religion, philosophy, logic, science, whatever. The big thing is, I'd like for people who don't share our beliefs to call in and explain what they believe and why. Perhaps we can have a discussion about that. Perhaps we agree on things. Perhaps we vehemently disagree on some things. And it's also a chance to kind of eliminate some of the misconceptions that people have about who atheists are, what we believe, what we don't believe. There's one of the questions we get asked quite a bit is, why on earth would you guys have, a group or a club to meet and talk about things you don't believe in? Because you're not a member of the I Don't Believe in Bigfoot Club. If there was an I Don't Believe in Bigfoot Club, and there were people who were going around claiming that anybody who didn't believe in Bigfoot deserved to be tortured, and that they were going to enact legislation to promote Bigfoot's rules on societies, I'd be a member of that club. It's just the way it works. The Atheist Experience is broadcast every Sunday. The audio portion is available for download from the website. You can go to the atheist-experience.com website for more information about the show. Older episodes are up in video on Google Video, and the new ones are going up on Flip TV. And I noticed that they've also added basically the previous week's show right there on the atheistexperience.com website as an embedded video. So that makes things a little bit handier. In addition to the Atheist Experience, the ACAA, our sponsor, also sponsors a bi-weekly internet audio podcast called The Nonprofits. For more information, you can go to nonprofitsradio.com. That's PHETS for nonprofits. There was not a nonprofit show yesterday. It was canceled due to work requirements, and so that's 2 in a row we've canceled, which means there hasn't been a nonprofit in about a month. We'll do what we can to correct that as well, and since we'll be using Dillahunty International Studios more often, we'll do what we can. I won't even be getting my weeks off that I'm supposed to. Since we're going to have to do the show at my place, my weeks off for the summer are gone. But that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. And my sacrifice is I don't get to take back a couple days later. Anyway, you can visit the website for more information. You can also email tv@atheistdrivingcommunity.org to contact any of us involved in the show, myself, the co-host, some of the people behind the scenes as well. We cannot answer every email that comes in. I'm 4 or 5 days behind easily. at the moment. We do read all of them, and we do what we can to respond. Any criticism, questions, feedback, doesn't matter whether you're a theist, an atheist, or not sure, pantheist, it doesn't matter. And you don't even have to be writing in to talk about anything related to atheism. Sometimes people just want to talk, which is why the ATA exists in the first place. One of our sponsors, our only sponsor, not one of our sponsors. It's not like, there's Coca-Cola as well. The Atheist Community of Austin is a nonprofit educational organization promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. You can visit the ACA webpage at www.atheist-community.org, and you can find out more about the group as well as ways to interact, to join, to participate in the discussion. And a number of other people in different areas have asked, well, hey, how do I start a group like that? And our group started with an ad in the newspaper 11 years ago, or actually a little over 11 years ago. And now, actually, you have access to much better ways to communicate the fact that you'd like to meet up with other like-minded people. You've got, Craigslist and message boards and forums and meetup groups and Facebook and MySpace and YouTube and whatever. It should be easier than ever, especially now that we're seeing more and more conversation about both religion and the atheist position, and best-selling books and debates and activities and conventions. For example, in July I'll be going to the Amazing Meeting 7, a skeptic conference hosted by the James Randi Educational Foundation every year in Las Vegas, and this will actually be my first year to be able to attend, and I'm definitely going, and I'm absolutely certain that I'm planning on going. I can't say that I'm absolutely certain I'll be there because it's in the future, and I don't have absolute knowledge of the future, but I don't want to get too crazy philosophical on people from the get-go. I am booked, though. Have a hotel, airfare, convention tickets, everything else. So anyway, stay tuned to the ACA website and the Atheist Experience website for more information about what's going to happen with the show over the summer. The ACA does a lot besides these shows, besides the Atheist Experience and the nonprofits as well. There's a brunch every Sunday at Romeo's. There's Atheist Happy Hour at Dog and Duck on Thursdays. We have blood drives, street cleanups. We have a lecture series the first Sunday of each month, and that will be next Sunday. And this coming Sunday's lecture will be Chris Comer, who was basically expelled. You can find out more information about that at the website. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to come to any of our events. You don't have to be a member to attend. The lecture is at the Austin History Center, located at the corner of 9th and Guadalupe, and if you can get there about 12:15, you should be good. So everybody's invited. Thanks a lot. And I'm Matt Dillahunty, which I didn't say. I don't know why. And you're Tracie Harris.
Yes, I am.
And we are here. Oh, dinner after the show. I forgot something. That's where we're eating today. Don't expect that we'll be continuing at Threadgill's because it's a farther drive from Dillahunty International Studios than it is from Channel Austin Studios. But we'll be there tonight. The show's on till 6, and we'll be down there about 6:30. How are you?
Good.
I'm tired.
I'm tired too, but not probably as much as you.
What did you bring today?
What I brought can actually wait. It was just the article that I had shared. It was a special to the Washington Post from Norman
So you just
Lear.
want to dig into callers?
We can do that if we get to this. That's fine. It's definitely not something that is pressing.
Cool.
Yeah.
In that case, we won't make them wait any longer. We got full phone lines, and we'll just get started. Is it Mike in Tampa?
Hello?
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm fine. How are you?
Pretty good. All right, well, I was calling in for the clarification of last week's discussion on metaphysics.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to find some terms, and maybe hopefully it'll be a little more clear.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's see. I'll start with ultimate reality. And by this I mean reality irrespective of our interpretations through the senses. And necessity, this is that which cannot be otherwise. For example, 2 + 2 = 4 with necessity in this universe, right? And metaphysics is a project.
I hate to interrupt you so quick, but I'm already having a slight problem because when you talk about the ultimate reality versus the reality we experience, and then you mentioned the absolute nature of something like 2 + 2 is 4 within this reality. But 2 + 2 equals 4, what that refers to, the actual assessment of valuation, is going to be true irrespective of which reality we're talking about. And the distinguishing characteristic between the ultimate and ultimate reality, the ultimate reality, what is ultimately true, versus what we experience, is one that I don't know needs to be addressed or that we could address. What I'm saying, I guess, is that, you know, like the brain in a vat thought experiments.
Yeah.
I experience some reality. I am forced pragmatically to operate within the reality that I experience. I accept, and you could say that this is unjustified or not, that other minds exist and are sharing this reality with me. It may be unjustified because this could also be a product of what I experience. But I can say nothing about the ultimate reality, about whether or not I'm actually a brain in a vat.
Right. Well, one of the problems with this objectivist kind of thing is you have to hold an axiom that your senses are valid with necessity. And do you believe in that?
No, I've said a number of times that, and we actually talked about this a little bit last week, the idea that the senses are properly basic is one that I reject. I do think that they are reliable, but that's demonstrated, and it's all within the context of the reality I experience. I know, for example, that even within the reality I experience, my senses can be fooled. And I discover this by investigation and a better application of those senses. On some level, there is the assumption that the information that I'm receiving from my senses is correct because my brain is doing the modeling, and it is my brain that, you know, either makes mistakes or gets it correct. So yeah, on that level, you're forced to assume that the information you're getting is correct.
Right, but you don't know with necessity. You take it as a kind of a practical gesture that it's useful
right,
to
pragmatic assumption.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was my argument pretty much, is that you can't claim that your metaphysical interpretation is necessary.
No, not to an ultimate reality, no.
Right. So once you accept that, that all metaphysical views are equally necessary, which means they're not necessary, 0% pretty much.
No.
Absolute knowledge of physical ultimate reality is impossible, and it turns out all views about ultimate reality are subjectively value-based, and whatever the individual uses as criteria for determining value.
You're conflating two different things, because we've already established, for example, that some things, and we do this, you know, philosophically, they're not dependent upon our senses. The values of 2 + 2 = 4, whatever that means in an ultimate sense, is necessarily true in whatever ultimate reality there is. The concept that I have, the addition of, you know, it doesn't matter what numbers or labels you put on it, 1 of this item plus 1 of this item is now 2 of this item, and that is ultimately absolutely true. So it's not true that we can't say anything at all about absolutes with regard to the ultimate reality. The same thing is true with regard to the logical absolutes of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle.
Okay, you can still accept the logical absolutes, but that doesn't make any metaphysical view necessary. It just makes logical absolutes necessary.
Right.
All right, so does that apply to my argument? I don't understand.
Well, you on the one hand, we're talking about a metaphysical outlook about the reality we experience. And then you went on to say that this makes all metaphysical outlooks equally valid, which I don't accept. Because
not equally valid, equally necessary.
Well, maybe it'd be more accurate to say equally not necessary.
Oh yeah.
But yeah. However, what we're talking about, though, is not the ultimate reality. We've already dispensed with that context, and we're talking about the reality that, for example, I experience. And so, for the reality that I experience, there are metaphysical views that are demonstrably more accurate than others.
Yeah, they're more accurate, but they're not necessary. They're more practical and useful in terms of truth, but there are other metaphysical views that are more practical and useful in terms of comfort.
Sure. And if you care more about whether or not a belief makes you comfortable than whether or not it's true, that's your prerogative. I would never and could never do that. My only concern is, or my primary concern is whether or not a belief's true, not whether or not it feels good.
Right. And a lot of people get this confused with like New Ageism, where they say that all metaphysical views are equally valuable, which that's not true. They're all equally necessary. And that's where they get the kind of confusion with that.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I do have an objection to the logical absolutes.
Okay.
Okay, imagine you're in a, imagine that a person lives in a fifth-dimensional universe, right? That all possible outcomes within one version of time. Okay. Imagine the same person in the sixth-dimensional universe, which is all possible outcomes with a different version of time.
Okay.
In universe B, which is the second one, the sixth-dimensional, the person is dead. In universe A, which is the fifth-dimensional, the person's alive.
Okay.
So here you have a problem where a person is dead and alive at the same time.
No, because you're talking about two different situations. The fact that you moved it into different dimensions doesn't make it any difference between the fact, just doesn't distinguish it between someday I'm going to be dead. So at that particular point, within that particular context, I will be dead. And at this particular point in this context, I'm alive. You're comparing apples and oranges, and the only reason that it looks like apples and apples is because you've added this dimensional construct around it.
But these dimensional constructs actually exist in reality. It's not in this universe, it's in the multiverse. But within reality,
well, first of all, I don't know
every single possible outcome of every single possible timeline exists.
First of all, I don't know that anybody's actually demonstrated that the multiverse exists, but still, even if they did, this is not a violation because we're talking about two distinctly different things. The logical absolutes apply to any individual thing, I'm forced to use this vague nebulous term, at a given time. It is, they use the present tense verb for a reason because we're talking about whatever this is. And whatever it is, that's what it is, and it's not something else. And if you want to look at these two possible meta-universe timelines as the same event, you are committing a category area because you're viewing it from outside. But at a minimum, you could then conflate those two and say that within this scope, this is the situation. It is what it is, and it's not what it's not, and it's not neither or both. And the situation being, in this particular timeline you're alive, and in this particular timeline you're dead. There's not a conflict there. There's only an apparent conflict from the viewpoint of, actually, it wouldn't even be from that viewpoint. From the viewpoint of person A and B, because they have no, they would recognize that they're not looking at the same thing, much in the way that, my clone isn't me.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Could you state it like, Jim is a guy who is alive in Dimension 5 and dead in Dimension 6, and he is not a guy who is not alive in Dimension 5 and dead in Dimension 6?
Yeah, that's essentially what
So he conforms, even being dead in one dimension and alive in another, he still conforms to the laws of logic. All they do is establish that you can create and define true dichotomies. They don't tell you anything about the specifics, and they certainly don't tell you anything about the specifics of other possible timelines and other possible dimensions. They just say that whatever the case is. Whatever it's not, and it's not neither or both. The fact that
so we say that when viewed in the scope of the multiverse, logical absolutes don't apply.
They still do. I don't know how else to explain it. And I appreciate the call, but we certainly didn't start off on a light note this week.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Not that we need to start off on a light note. I just don't need, there's only a handful, even within our audience, there's only a handful of people who really care about discussions like that. I happen to be one of them, and it's a bit of a geeky element, but.
It's just funny that all the calls so far are referring back to the last program.
Yeah.
You were like, I'd like Trace to take some calls. Like, well, but they're all kind of going back to your prior call.
We got Tom in New York.
Hi.
How you doing, Tom?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Good.
Good and tired.
I just wanted to start off by saying I apologize. You just said that everybody's referring back to the last show, and I'm about to do the same thing.
Well, yeah, I was looking at the screen. Yeah.
We know what you're going to ask before you ask it.
That's fine.
That's incredible. But yeah, I just wanted, there was a caller that you had last week, and it sounds like it wasn't the first transaction between you and this guy.
It's actually the first time we'd spoken. I just had been directed to go watch one of his videos by somebody.
Oh, I see. So you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, there were a couple things that he said that really kind of got under my skin just in a number of cases, particularly when he referred to the Gospels. And it seemed to me like he was attempting to make the assertion that the Gospels were evidence that miracles occurred, and that the Gospels themselves were sufficient evidence to prove that claim.
Yeah.
And I mean, I could just go through this one by one. I mean, the first major problem there is that Scripture in general is you're standing on shaky ground. I mean, that more often than not should not be taken alone as evidence of any claim. I mean, there's no scientific capacity to test it. Certainly in the case of the Gospels, authorship can't be confirmed. And in fact, the evidence that does exist in the Gospels, meaning the words themselves, suggests that there's so much variation between them that they themselves are evidence against the claims they make.
I don't necessarily buy the last one.
No.
Because, for example, if for the sake of argument we were to say that these were several different eyewitness accounts, the fact that they vary a little is actually not surprising.
Well,
and it's not evidence that it's not.
That, for example, in a court of law, when two eyewitness accounts vary slightly, I mean, that's expected.
Yeah.
But in the case of, say, for example, I think it's Matthew and Luke, or no, I'm sorry, yes, Matthew and Luke, there are certain parts that are word for word copied from Mark.
Yeah. That was actually something I addressed in the original video that he tried to respond to, but he didn't. Basically, I said, you know, if Matthew is an eyewitness, why would he have to copy from Mark?
Right.
And his response in his original video was, well, it's not surprising at all that Matthew would copy from Mark because Mark got his stuff from Peter, who is, you know, the foundation of the church, and so this was for consistency. So wait a minute. In my objection, I said, you've got an eyewitness who's not reporting things in his own words, and this is a problem for me. And in your response, you say, but the reason he didn't report his own words is because he wanted to take crib notes from a guy who wasn't an eyewitness, but heard about it from somebody who was supposedly a better eyewitness? That's your response to this? It's insane.
He was talking about Matthew specifically, right? Not Luke.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Matthew and Luke both did it.
But Luke was not an eyewitness.
That's really all I wanted to point out. I mean, and another point was that you're making the best dating methods that we have today put these documents roughly at about 50-55 AD, 20 years after the death of Christ.
Yeah, or later.
Yeah. That's a conservative. Those are the conservative estimates as well.
Right. And we're talking about only two documents here, and I believe that was Mark and Luke are dated at 50 AD. I mean, so the remainder are 90 and later. I mean, so given that, I mean, you're talking about the average lifespan was what, 35, 40?
No, it was a little higher than that. But I mean, you hit the main point right off the bat, which was Tommy, the caller from last week, accepts that text alone is sufficient to establish that a miracle happened.
Yeah.
I don't. And for people who do think that text alone should be sufficient, having something that comes from an eyewitness, as they would claim that Matthew might be, or they would claim that it is, strengthens that argument. Well, here's my response. It's really simple. I have relatives who I care about, love, and trust, who I don't think would lie to me about what they're saying. And they have told me directly that they have seen demons, that Jesus is real, that heaven and hell are real, and that it is important for me to believe them because they're telling me the truth. I believe that they have experienced something. I do not believe their explanation for it. If a letter from my own beloved relatives was to arrive in my mailbox telling me that they saw zombies get up and walk into town, I would not believe it. It doesn't matter that it's from an eyewitness or that it's from an eyewitness that I care about or from an eyewitness that I trust. That alone is not sufficient evidence to support the claim.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's really kind of disconcerting to me that someone could simply take an eyewitness account. I mean, and a shaky one at that. But that's really all I wanted to call in and talk about. Thanks. I'm a huge fan of the show, and I'll keep watching.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Yet another New York caller, because George actually called before the show. But I'm betting he probably would call in again at the end, because that's what he does. We got Cameron in Hayes, Kansas.
Hi, how are you?
How you doing?
Hi.
Good. I was just wanting to call in and talk about morality.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to ask you probably a good question before we would jump into that topic is when I define morality, I define it as this way: a real morality where there are real rights and real wrongs that we are really accountable to. So if this discussion would be meaningful whatsoever, I just have to ask, is that the type of morality you guys believe in?
I don't know.
I don't know what you mean by a real, what do you mean when you say, give me an example of a real right and a real wrong that I think you said that you would be responsible to?
Really being really accountable to. So a practical example would be selfishly hating someone in your heart would be really wrong. And selflessly loving somebody would be really good.
Okay, first of all, and I hate to be literal anal boy, but my heart doesn't hate people. Now, I realize that you're metaphorically talking about the mind, but while I would say that hating someone is potentially unhealthy,
Right.
I don't see anything at all immoral about hating somebody. And as a matter of fact, I would say that there are probably some people who are deserving of hatred. But I wouldn't say that this is necessarily immoral.
Yeah, I don't know that I could call a thought that did not result in action immoral. It's simply a thought. I mean, you haven't done anything. Is he still on the line?
Oh, I think we lost him. I didn't go near the thing. I didn't hang up on him. See if we can get Cameron
I mean, there's
back.
still, the lines are still
They're
loaded.
all. Oh, somebody in the studio accidentally hung up on Cameron. Cameron, see if you can get back in. I apologize, but we can talk about this kind of simply.
Yeah.
My view on morality is that it addresses actions, not thoughts. And while thoughts do lead to actions and belief informs your actions,
Sure.
So you could make the argument that you're going to act based on your beliefs. So there are some beliefs that lead to immoral actions.
But if I hate you, I may just avoid you, and I don't see that as immoral to avoid someone. I mean,
but when you say real rights and real wrongs, it makes it sound like almost that you're talking about some kind of absolute universal morality. And it'll surprise you that to some extent I actually agree with you. My absolute morality is more based on situational. That in any given situation, there's a number of different actions that could occur, and some of those actions are better than others, and some are worse than others. So for that specific set of circumstances, there must be either one action or one group of actions that are the best possible actions considering the goals of,
yeah, that's the thing. You've got goals and values that are both outlined in there that are going to impact that decision.
Provided you can agree on the goals, you can agree on what would be roughly the pinnacle of rightness or the abyss of wrongness. But because that is different for each, it's similar in different scenarios. It's easy to say murder is wrong. Well, okay, well, what do you mean by murder?
Correct.
Is it just killing somebody? Is killing another person always wrong in every situation? No, well, it turns out, oh, hang on. You there, Cameron?
Hello?
Cameron?
Hi, I can barely hear you.
Okay, but you got
you're
back on?
Yeah, I'm back now.
We tried to continue the explanation without you, so it's your turn.
Okay, I heard a little bit of what you said. Let me go ahead and jump in here. Yeah, with saying real rights and real wrongs, that is kind of shorthand for saying absolute morality. And then I would, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, and then going kind of along with what you're saying, I would agree that context has to be taken into account. So going back to my question, where we have a context where something is really wrong, you take into account the actions being carried out, the thought that might be carried out, the person's intention, all of that, given that circumstance where something would be really wrong, on what basis would we have to say that it would really be wrong or really be right?
There's two bases that come to mind immediately for me. One would be my own personal judgment, and the other would be a societal judgment. So in other words, I may look at it and say, this is really wrong, but society may deem that what they did is okay, and therefore it's not enforced. What I think is wrong is not enforced and irrelevant to anyone but me. But
go ahead. Sorry to interrupt. Okay, this is what I would say to that both of those things would be arbitrary standards for arbitrary reasons.
And that's why you have arbitrary rules that are different around the globe. That's why no two societies have the same standards of law and morality.
It's about increasing your understanding and determining which goals and values you want and which ones are better for yourself and for society. For example, I would say that one of the things that I would consider to be a moral absolute is that it is morally wrong everywhere, at all times, for one human being to own another human being as property. That this always was wrong, even if societies didn't recognize it's wrong. And how can I say that? Because I am the ultimate judge of what I consider to be right and wrong. I am evaluating their moral standards according to my own and saying, no, I'm sorry, I realize you guys thought this was moral, but I say that this is absolutely immoral. Now, if there are other people that agree with me, great, then we can begin, creating
social change or whatever you want,
and begin to change the world around us.
Or go set up your own country where there's not slavery.
And hopefully we're constantly getting better at this. Right. But I would say that owning another human being is wrong and always has been, even if they wasn't recognized.
Okay, but like I said, the logical conclusion to all this is that what is said to be right and wrong is not really right or wrong.
Correct.
It's just arbitrarily right or wrong for arbitrary reasons. Something could be wrong yesterday, then we could change our mind. Society could change our mind, or I could change my mind and be right today.
There's a difference between arbitrary and variant. Okay, you can have very good reasons for why you decide something is right or wrong. I don't know that it's arbitrary.
But people can have different reasons, so therefore it's
yes,
arbitrary.
that's correct. But when I think of arbitrary, I tend to think of what you were saying before, that, oh, you could just do this, you could just do that. And really, there is a certain biological function in your head that is a social animal that wants you to have a cohesive society. So there's going to be a biological drive in your head as a social animal that's going to make you want to create a system where...
Yeah, now you're pointing to something else, saying that there's some standards saying that my biological nature is what determines real morality, real right.
I'm saying I'm saying that it...
standard that you haven't provided.
No, I'm saying that it impacts your desire as a social animal.
But why should I listen to it just because it's my desire?
Because you can't survive as a single human being.
Okay, now you're begging the question. You're assuming I need to survive as opposed to not survive.
No, if you don't want to survive, it doesn't matter. I agree.
Well, some people don't want to.
That's fine. Then they don't need the social construct.
Morality still.
The standard is determined by the being and by the society.
Okay, we've already gone over that.
And what's the problem with it? I don't know what it is you want to get to. The fact that you...
The problem is that there's no real rights and no real wrongs that people are really accountable to.
I agree.
Arbitrary rights and arbitrary wrongs for arbitrary reasons.
I agree. There is no innate right and wrong absolutes that exist irrespective of a thinking viewpoint.
Correct.
I agree.
Correct.
Okay, so everybody in the world who tries to claim to be a moralist is really just using a word like blah, blah. You go around with saying, I'm a blah, blah, and we don't really know what that even means or why we should be blah, blah.
Curiously, you and I and Tracie can have a conversation about this, so clearly it's not equivalent to blah, blah.
According to my worldview, we're created in the image of God, and we have a moral compass.
How do you know that?
Within us.
That makes no sense.
Well, my worldview is more consistent than yours because that's the practicality
How
of the
can that be consistent?
Okay,
how can that be consistent?
Because that's the practicality of the way the world works, and you're proving that that's the case because you're saying that it's innate within you to have your nature to want to survive.
But here is the problem. It's also innate in other social animals, but it's less innate in non-social animals. Why is it that when you breed something like a Siberian fox to become more social, it gains what we would label as more...
Okay, so why is it that animals can eat each other, but yet if I go eat children for the fun of it...
Now wait a second. We have an animal, a Siberian fox, that is a solo animal. This is a solo animal. It's not a social animal. You can breed this animal to be more passive, and in doing so, it actually breeds a more social variant of that animal. The social variant is more prone to social interaction with people and other animals.
Okay, again, you're begging the question that that animals or living organisms need to survive as opposed to not survive.
No.
No, I'm not. No, I'm demonstrating that you can breed morality into an animal.
Hang on, Cameron, please. There's no question begging here. There are two possibilities. Either the species has survival as a goal, or it does not. If it does not, then it doesn't matter.
Nothing.
If it does, you better let me finish, or I swear I'm going to hang up on your ass.
I don't care.
Me neither. The other option...
See, if you don't care if you survive...
Yeah, if you don't care if you survive,
matter.
piss off. The other option is that survival does matter, and therefore it becomes a basis. However, I'm just going to go ahead and preemptively jump to what you wanted to get to, which is that there must be some divine author of a moral code. Well, first of all, there is no universal moral code. Second of all, let's take a look at that situation. And the Euthyphro dilemma is particularly useful for this. Is something moral because God says so, or does God say so because it's moral? If the first one is true, something becomes moral because God said so, that's divine command. That is morality by fiat. And all you've done is shifted the supposed arbitrary, in your verbiage, decision about what's right and wrong from us to this authority, which is, by the way, what we do when we shift from the individual to society. But you're shifting it to some nebulous God who curiously happens to agree with you. But all you've done is taken what would have been arbitrary and shift the arbitrary nature up to something else. There is no absolute morality in divine command theory. There is no absolute morality. It is just one step removed from our subjective assessment. If the opposite is true, that God says something because it's moral, then there is some moral absolute standard, but God is now irrelevant. Your divine author supposedly is not the author, he's the messenger boy, which means that we should be able to determine these standards without his guidance. Now, in one case, you don't have moral absolutes, and in the case where you do, your God, supposed author, is not the author and is irrelevant. When we go around to make assessments, by the way, how did you come to the conclusion that God is the good one? I ask that. Obviously, you're not still on the line, and there's no reason to call back because you don't get through again today, guaranteed. How did you make that assessment? Well, you could say, and I'm sure you would, as most apologists do, that God has written a moral code in your heart that lets you know what is good, so you were able to recognize good. But you're talking about a super being. And if I'm a super being who determines what's right and wrong and I stick it in your heart, then you're going to think that I'm whatever I tell you to think that I am. In actuality, you have used your own moral standards to assess the claims within the religion to determine which claims are consistent with your understanding of morality and said, that's the good one. You are exercising your morality the same way everybody else is. Own up to it. Take a little credit for it. You know why you don't? Because I don't think you exercise it to the same extent that other people do. I think you buy into cheap arguments from authority, like the ones you tried to spew here. I think you buy into fallacies, and by the way, if you go around saying, that's question begging, it's question begging, when it's not, you look like a tool. The argument that Tracie was making had nothing to do with saying, ooh, here's the ultimate standard, it's biological. It was very simple, and she explained it. There's two possibilities. Either survival is something you're looking for, or survival is not something you're looking for. And if it's not, that situation becomes irrelevant. Sorry.
You can hit on him some more now that he's gone.
Well, it's just, it reminded me of something I saw earlier on a program that I can't even bring myself to watch because it just disturbs me too much, and that's 18 and Counting.
Oh.
And I've tried twice to watch it, and I can't do 5 minutes. I really can't do 5 minutes. And on the last one, what pulled my trigger on the remote was, I try to watch it because I want to see what they're doing with these kids. But I can't even watch it long enough to, I can't take it. The last one I saw, they had, I guess the 18th one was being added. They collect children, and it's like a wacky religious family, I'm going to say. They're not like just even your standard, what you would think of as your Christian next door. This is like the mother talks and you see the swirling stars. And she has, they had 17 kids, and some are adopted and some are theirs, I think, and they were getting a new one. And so they wanted an 18th, and they were getting an 18th, and the little boy was asking at some point, why are all the cameras here, and what are they, recording everything with the new baby? And the mother, he says, my mom told me that the cameras are all here because, God has blessed us with all these children, and people want to see because we're so blessed by God. And I'm like, no, people are watching because you're freaks with you're collecting children, and that's fine that if you're treating them nicely, but frankly, it's a sideshow what you're producing. And in addition to that, you're telling
God has blessed me with 3
this
arms.
child, you're telling the child that the efforts that you put in to get pregnant and have however many of these kids you had, and the effort that you put into, children don't just show up at your door, generally. And you're telling him that this is God who did it, but it's not God who did it, it's the parents that did it. These people went out, took steps, and there's a cause and effect chain that begins with, we're going to collect these kids, and we're going to, even let's say that it's a benevolent, I want to give them a good home, they are disadvantaged, whatever. But you start collecting the children, and you take steps to do that, and you do it, and then you tell the child, God did this. It's not true. And with the morality issue, what I'm seeing is social animals, which can be, you can take animals that aren't social, breed them to be more social, and they start having interaction. And when animals desire to interact with one another, there must be rules. Now, as we talked about with the caller, the rules can vary so long as the goals of the society are met. Sometimes those rules are extremely harsh, like when you hear Sharia law. And sometimes the rules are extremely lenient. You think of Amsterdam and maybe Sweden or somewhere. But the fact is there are many ways to get to those goals, and many things that a society will call moral. And some of those things are atrocities to another society. Yeah. So, one culture will say, we're going to go and raid the other village, and we're going to just machete everyone to death, and that's how it's done. And we would say, oh my God, that's hideous, But this is something that you can see an animal move toward when you breed it. And the fact that you have aberrations, which are, people are sometimes suicidal, that is not the standard. And the standard for a social animal is that it's going to want to be in a unit with other animals that help it survive, because it is less able to survive on its own than an animal that is not social.
The benefits of being a social animal contribute to your assessment of what's moral. All of a sudden, you can be less selfish.
Right.
And there's a good reason to not be as selfish, because supporting the group provides benefits. The longer your view is, the better you can set goals. This is one of the crowning achievements, I guess, of having a brain that can do problem solving and make accurate predictions about the future. We see, as Tracie was talking about with other animals, as they become more social, they develop more things that are more like morality. This isn't, it's not, I don't want to make it sound overly simplistic, but it's not necessarily the great puzzle that people make it out. We are in the moral situation, we make the moral assessments we make today because we have thousands and thousands of years of this process going on. And it is a kind of self-correcting process. Yes, there are aberrations from time to time. Yes, there are people who will run out and, like this morning, kill a doctor who performs abortion right in his church.
yeah, there are always going to be some people who do things like that. But the trend is usually towards the betterment of the individual and the better of the society. That's not some firm authoritarian goal that is mandated. It's just that you discover that this is what works better. And it becomes infused in like the zeitgeist of culture, of what's going on and changing. There aren't simple answers when it comes to morality. And those people who would impose incredibly simple answers, I think are being, disingenuous.
I have to throw something in. It's just a humorous thing. And this happened to me the other night when I was watching television. I saw a commercial. And are you familiar with like Reese's, the little Reese's cups? You don't like them, I think you said one time.
I'm addicted to them.
Oh, I thought, what was we talking about? Peanut
now
butter
that I'm not
something.
allowed to have them, I'm actually craving
it was it was a new commercial for Reese's, and it said, sharing is nice, and it shows because they come in two. So it's like sharing is nice, and it showed the two little Reese's cookies, and one of them had a bite out of it. And then the next frame said, stupid, but nice. And I thought about it, and I was like, that's funny because really, altruistic behavior does have a reward. And, I'm starting to go into that in my head. And then I thought, it's just a Reese's commercial. It's not, this is just a commercial.
By the way, quick note to the studio, I think the information you have for caller number 2 on line 2 is wrong, so that's what I was asking about, and we'll have to hold up on that. But let's go to Josh in New York.
Yes, hello?
How you doing, Josh?
Good. I wanted to talk about why I think you're wrong when you say the default position is non-belief.
Why I'm wrong?
Default position is non-belief.
Okay.
I think this is one of those cases where the default position is actually squarely in the middle of the two claims. Like it's claim one.
What claims are we talking about?
Okay, let me define the claims. Claim one would be there is no God of any sort, no transcendent being of any sort.
Straw man.
And claim two would be that there is a transcendent being that started everything.
Here's the problem. You're talking about two claims.
Right.
Belief necessarily addresses an individual claim. Not two claims.
Right.
The default position would be to reject both of those claims until...
Okay, well, what's the default position? No, the first position is the default position that there's no God. That's what you believe.
No, that's not the default position. It's not what I believe. It's not what I've ever said. And matter of fact, you can go to the ACA website, and on the lecture series, I gave a lecture that's called Belief. You can go down and actually watch it on Google. And there you'll get exact definitions of what I'm talking about. But I'll simplify it. When we talk about belief, we are always necessarily addressing a single claim because you cannot necessarily demonstrate that you can have a single belief about multiple claims. So it's one claim. If the claim is some God exists, the default position, I claim, is not to accept that claim until it is supported. If the claim was no gods exist, the default position, I would say, is not to accept that claim until there's sufficient evidence.
But this is kind of like a semantics game because what I'm really saying is that when somebody makes a claim that there's a God and then your response is that the default position is to reject that claim, I think what's happening is you yourself are subtly making your own claim even though you're not stating it. Because what you're making a claim that no God exists.
No, I'm not. Actually, Josh, I will make that claim, but that's not what I'm doing when I when I reject their claim.
But I think you're not fleshing it out. But
it's not my responsibility. If somebody is asserting a claim and I say I don't accept that claim, it is not then my responsibility to flesh out what I do accept. For example, if somebody says A, I can just say not A, but I don't have to say no B, no C, no D. There are plenty of other options there. I am not asserting a position, I am responding to one.
So you don't have any position of your own?
I do.
But he's saying that's not relevant to the question, to the point about rejecting the claim until it's sufficiently supported.
On the claim of existence, X exists, the burden of proof is necessarily always on the assertion that X exists. We do not begin with the
But
assumption.
if there's only two options, then you're automatically saying Y exists if you're saying X doesn't exist.
No, because what he was talking about before is that you could reject both claims.
So how can there not be a God and not be not a God?
No, you
No.
could simply be saying, I don't believe either because there's insufficient data upon which to base a
I'm not
belief.
talking about a specific
Hang-
type of God. Or
hang
I'm
on.
not either.
Hang-
Wait,
hang
this
on.
could be any claim. It doesn't have to be a claim about God. Any claim at all, I can say there's insufficient data upon which to base a belief, and I can.
But then
say,
if you're rejecting the claim for it and saying the claim against it, then you'd be an agnostic.
See,
no, because
no.
agnostic deals
Well-
with knowledge, not belief.
Josh, are you listening?
Yeah.
I kid you not. Go listen to the lecture because I explain this in great detail, but I'll give you the short version right here. There are two possible truth values. God exists, God does not exist. That's it. They're mutually exclusive. Those are the two possible actual truth values. Now, we're talking about belief values. Do you believe this claim? No. Do you believe this claim? No. It's possible to not believe either because belief is the acceptance that a claim is true. There's two different levels here. There is X is either X or not S. X is necessarily the claim. God or no God is necessarily the actual truth assessment. That's a valid dichotomy. But your belief about that situation is not limited to those two options. And because it's not
I
limited,
don't see another possible option.
Rejecting both claims.
rejecting both claims is unsupported. Here.
Okay, but so then you would
No,
say
no,
agnostic.
stop, Josh, gosh.
He's going to give you an example here.
All right.
I flipped the coin. There are only two options. Is it heads or tails?
You're asking me, or you're?
Do you believe that it's heads?
No.
Do you believe that it's tails?
No, but
I
then-
rest my case.
I understand what you're saying, but then I wouldn't call myself an atheist. I would
Okay.
call myself agnostic.
The moment you say you do not accept that the God exists, that you do not accept that it's heads, you are an atheist. And whether or not you accept its tails is irrelevant. Because
Okay, but I think there's a flaw in the analogy. I really do, because the difference is that whether it's heads or tails, it has you don't know that. In this case,
Right.
when you're thinking about is there a God or not, if there's not a God, that there's an automatic way things have to be if there wasn't a God.
Is there
Everything
automatic
just
what?
has to happen. With heads or tails, it doesn't matter what it is.
Okay, let me change this up because I dealt with this last night. In my hand, there's either a quarter that is heads up or there's something else.
Okay?
Tracie says that there's a quarter that's heads up and that this must necessarily be the case, and we'll just call her theist. I don't believe her, so I'm going to say I'm an atheist because I don't believe her claim.
But in this
And I
case,
haven't said a thing about what I might think is in that hand.
And in this case, you're right, but the analogy doesn't work because in this case, if it's not heads, it's not heads. It doesn't say anything. It could be anything else. In this case, in the other case, if there's not a God, that's making a statement of its own. Because then it's saying a whole bunch of things if there's no God. It's saying that you're making claim by saying that you don't believe in a God. You're making a whole lot of claims subtly, even if you're not stating them.
No, you're not.
No, okay. From what you're saying, when you say you're making a lot of claims subtly but without stating them, for what I think you mean, I'll actually go ahead and agree with you. But that's not the point. The default position is to not accept a claim until there is sufficient evidence. For the claim, God exists, I have not seen sufficient evidence to accept the claim, and therefore I reject it. That does not mean that I also accept the claim that there are no gods, because that's another claim that has to be supported by its own evidence. And whoever is making the claim has the burden of proof. If I were to come on the show and say there are no gods, and I'm trying to convince people of that, I have the burden of proof to demonstrate that. But fortunately, much like in a court of law where either the defendant is either guilty or innocent, You vote as a jury either guilty or not guilty, and it doesn't matter if you are just unconvinced of the person's guilt or if you actually think they're innocent, you are still in the not guilty camp because there is a default assumption. The default presumption is innocence until guilt is demonstrated, and with questions of existence, the default presumption is that it doesn't exist until existence is demonstrated.
Okay, so you're saying that by being an atheist, you're not making any claim at all, you're only rejecting a claim.
It's not necessary to make a claim. There are atheists who would say there's no God, but my point is, if I define an atheist as someone who does not believe a God exists, which I would assume is unobjectionable, then the moment I say, I don't believe claim A, I don't believe the coin is on heads, it doesn't matter whether I believe B or not, because I've just said I don't believe God exists. Now, I may or may not believe that there are no gods, but as soon as I say I can't accept that there is a God, even if I put yet at the end of that there's not yet supporting evidence, I could change my mind, but right now I can't accept that claim. I'm saying I don't believe your claim. I don't believe your claim that a God exists, and that makes me a non-believer. And a person who does not believe a God exists is an atheist.
The only reason there's any confusion over this at all is because this is a peculiar situation where you have people who are defining themselves with a label that is a response to something else. It's not like when the jury walks out, they say, we're the non-guiltiest. It doesn't happen. That's why there seems to be confusion over this. Now, I am one of the people who would happily tell you that my personal belief is that there are no gods. Now, I don't make this claim in the hopes of convincing anybody. I am happy to discuss why I have that, why I actually have that belief. I don't claim this belief to an absolute degree of certainty, and I'm perfectly willing to be wrong. The reason I don't mention it is because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that I'm in the innocent camp. I'm in the not guilty camp. And that's the only thing that matters, because
but the not guilty camp, okay, all right. If you have, use the coin example again.
Why? No. We're not using the coin example again, because the guilty, not guilty example demonstrates it better.
But what if you just, use the guilty, not guilty example. What if you reversed it and said there's no God? Then you have to be in the not guilty camp and say there's not evidence for that?
Well, what you've done is you reversed the default position. So now instead of... Are you going to let me answer? Are you going to let me answer?
He's probably going to agree with you.
You've reversed the default position to where normally we have, at least in this country, innocent until proven guilty. What you've done there is switched it to guilty until proven innocent. Now,
okay, go ahead.
Now, there's a reason why we use innocent until proven guilty, and it's because we have as a goal the goal of limiting the number of people who are falsely imprisoned by making the standards of demonstrating guilt high enough that guilt isn't assumed, that you have to prove your innocence. We limit the number of people who are falsely convicted. That is exactly the same reason why claims of existence are in the position where they need to be supported by evidence, because it limits the number of false claims of existence that we're likely to accept. It's about standards of evidence. It's the reason why scientific standards of evidence are what they are, because we care about whether or not our beliefs are true. We want to believe as many true things and as few false things, and that is the methodology, that is the default position that demonstrably produces those results. It's not arbitrary. It's not like somebody said, oh, no, we're just going to say existence is what needs to be proved instead of non-existence. And you know this yourself, almost intuitively. Do you believe in the Loch Ness Monster until somebody proves that he doesn't exist?
Right, but that's making a specific ridiculous claim. See, I can't...
Why is that a specific ridiculous claim? Because I think you're God claiming.
Because you're talking about a specific nature of something that isn't necessary. If the Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist, that doesn't say anything. If a God as a whole
it says that it doesn't
never existed, that does say something.
No, it only says something in your particular definition of what God is. And while I don't know what it is, based on what you've said so far, I'm willing to assume that your definition of God is something that I probably find just as ridiculous, perhaps even more so, than the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or fairies. You know why? Because I bet your God is some kind of omnipotent, all-powerful, transcendent, outside of time thing for which we have no reason to think anything like that could exist, when in fact fairies are not all that unrealistic if you get rid of the magic parts.
Okay, but I think when you were using the jury example with the disagreement here, and I can see that it's not going to be, I'm not going to bridge the gap, but I think the disagreement here is coming from the fact that you see claiming that a God exists as a claim, and you can reject that, and the default position is non-belief. And I see that if you are claiming that there's no God at all, you yourself are making a claim yourself, because you're saying everything just happened. So they're actually two claims. They're not.
No.
It's just phrased in a way where it sounds like it's one claim, and you know the default position is non-belief, but it's really two claims.
No.
The specific nature of a God then would be my responsibility to prove to you.
No, Josh, no, absolutely not. You're so fractally wrong, it's not even funny. Because here's the truth.
Fractally wrong?
Yes, fractally wrong. It means you're wrong at every conceivable resolution of your claim. Here's the thing. Either a God exists or it doesn't. That is a true dichotomy. What you're saying is that either a God exists and is responsible for creating the universe in exactly the manner in which we see it now, or the universe just happened by chance with no direction, blah, blah, blah. You are ignoring all other possibilities of how a universe might be explained. You are conflating two different issues: God's existence, explanation for the universe. Once again, you are taking two separate claims and conflating them, and you're fractally wrong for doing so.
Okay.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you.
We got John in Melbourne, Florida.
Hey, guys.
How you doing?
Hey.
Pretty good. Hey, I just want to first say I appreciate you guys having a show like this where people can call in.
Thanks. It got really hot in here.
Well, I'm hearing a lot of
warmer
static.
than normal.
Is that me or?
You sound fine.
You sound fine. Go ahead.
Okay, I think I'm hearing myself on your show being broadcast. That's what it is. Okay. Let me just try to ignore it. It kind of throws me off a little bit. I got a couple things really quick before I get into my question. What you were just telling the previous caller about the claim thing, as in guilty or not guilty, you claim we don't call ourselves the not guiltiest. But I think in statement, you're correct, but in what you actually do, indeed, you're totally contradicting yourself. You have a show called the Atheist Experience. To go ahead and put a show on the air like that, you are making some type of claim.
Yes, I'm claiming that I don't accept theistic claims.
Okay, and then that's not my main reason for calling anyway. And another thing, I think what the previous caller was trying to narrow down was either intelligence caused the universe or not. And if you say intelligence did not cause the universe, I'm not specifically referring to God, I'm saying intelligence. By default, you're saying the non-intelligence caused the universe or no intelligence at all. Because there is neither a thing that is not intelligent or intelligent. It's either one or the other. So in that way, whether you open your mouth about it, you are by default in that position.
Let me see if I can phrase it this way. I agree. Either the universe is the result of intelligent causes or it's not. Those are the only two possibilities. And my position is that I am unconvinced that intelligent causes are responsible for the universe.
Okay.
Now, I'll go a step further and say that all of the available evidence points to unintelligent causes for the universe. That is my assessment of it, but it's a different issue from whether or not I accept the bald, unfounded assertion that intelligence is necessary and responsible.
That sounds fair enough. My question is, do you believe that God is improbable?
Which God?
Go ahead, because that's what I was going to ask.
Which God?
The Judeo-Christian God. The God with the characteristics of that God: eternal, maximally great being, intelligent, all-powerful.
If he's both all-powerful and all-knowing, and if he endowed people with free will, then at some levels he's contradicting.
Is that what makes him improbable, though?
Well, that would almost make him impossible.
I mean, if you define a God in such a way that it is logically self-contradictory, then I'd say that God is impossible. And I think that some definitions for the Christian God definitely do that. They're kind of naive. They're not used. What a lot of apologists have done is said, when they deal with the Christian God's supposed omniscience or omnipotence, sorry, they say God has all powerful that is logically possible, that type of thing, in order to avoid the contradictions. My thing is that I can't tell you how probable or improbable such a God is. I am not convinced that that there's any reason to think such a God is probable. And if you take the additional claims that people make about this God, for example, with intercessory, I'm going to put you on hold because we're getting like
some kind of
wind or something, but
yeah.
You can still hear it. When you take the claims that people make about this particular God, things like intercessory prayer, or God has a plan, or God wants this for you, or, for example, Ray Comfort, who says he can demonstrate God exists to anybody in 30 seconds, because if you just kneel down and sincerely ask God to reveal himself to you, he will. Well, there are people who have done that, including myself, and I didn't get any revelation, and the response is, well, you weren't sincere enough. Well, okay. There are so many things, so many claims about the Christian God that are absurdly, that are so absurd that they make it improbable. You have competing goals. You have a proposed goal that God has of, I don't know, maybe the universe exists as some kind of soul filter to distinguish the good souls from the bad souls. But that carries with it implications about whether or not you're good and evil. And yet the Christian idea of God doesn't care about that at all. All it cares about, the foundational principle of this substitutional atonement, is do you believe, including deathbed conversions, and then you get to go to heaven. The absurdity that some guy who rapes and kills a little girl who's not saved, that this girl could go to hell, and by the way, I'm not saying that every Christian believes in hell or the same type of hell, but the absurdity that this little girl could go to hell because she was unsaved by particular theology, and this guy could then become saved and go to heaven. That is not a system that I would assess as perfectly just, and I don't think anybody else would either. As a matter of fact, I'd say it's perfectly absurd. So when you talk about the different claims that people make about it, some of them seem to be in conflict. And since we can't get any resolution on like Tracie asked, well, what do you mean, which God are you talking about? You said the Judeo-Christian God and listed some qualities, but, there's 1,000 denominations of Christian.
Right.
Yes, you could probably define a God that's probable. It's just that most of those turn out to be useless. Like, my God is this coffee cup or something like that. You're back, John. Sorry.
Yeah. Can you still hear me? Or?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. It just sounded weird for a second. My question about that, when you mentioned, I can understand the emotional objection to like a murderer or whatnot. All of a sudden, because of their faith, they are, they're right with God just because of their faith. But what I think you're implying is that God is judging. You're presupposing there's some kind of standard. Now, I'm not getting into objective morality, but I'm saying that why would God allow the murderer or the rapist to enter heaven? He's using a standard to judge them by. The problem is if God is using a standard to judge the rapist and the murderer, that means there's a standard, and we can't define where it begins and ends. So even Joe Blow, the neighbor who's never committed a crime, how do we know the standard ends at rape and murder? How do we know it doesn't go further than that? Because the whole what the Bible says is that we all sin. We all have secret thoughts and things that go on the inside, and you know that as well as I do. I mean,
right.
I know you're an atheist, but I know you have a conscience. You know, when
it's not a matter of
you do something against your wife. The problem is with that kind of you're limiting God on what He can judge. You're saying God should only judge a rapist or a murderer, but Joe Blow, the neighbor who's always gone to work and takes care of his family, should enter heaven.
Well, the problem is
what the Bible says. Hold on, let me finish real quick.
Go ahead.
What the Bible says is that there is a standard. The standard doesn't begin and end where we choose. The standard goes beyond that. It's saying that none of us achieve it. So we can't sit there and reject the Bible. I mean,
yes, we can.
The specific claim you mentioned.
Yes, we
because
can.
God, it doesn't make sense because God would let a murderer or
no, John.
No. Let me finish real quick. I'm sorry, real quick.
No. You don't get to finish preaching if I'm sitting here objecting to what you're saying.
I can barely hear you. That's why. I'm sorry for that.
That's fine.
But you understand what I'm saying? We got.
For crying out loud.
There we go.
I was talking about that there are different standards that different Christian groups have claimed. I understand the
the position that you're talking about, it was one that I used to accept as well. What I'm saying is that you are fundamentally wrong. We can assess that standard and determine whether or not it is just and moral. The fact that some old book asserts that there is some higher authority, even if it's true, even if the Bible is true and there is a God and he's judging people by some standard, I find it morally repugnant and reprehensible, and I want nothing to do with him. Anybody who would advocate that person X deserves to be tortured forever in hell or annihilated simply because they could not believe something for which there was insufficient evidence, while some other credulous numbskull can go out and kill and murder and rape and have a deathbed, that is not justice. It is not. And yes, I am imposing my own moral standards on it, but you know what? I'm more moral than the God of the Bible. I'm more moral than any character in the Bible, and so are you. And I wish people like you would own up to that and realize it, instead of saying, oh, there's some standard that we don't understand. Oh, for crying out loud. Is there any possible way you could conceive of a standard that would punish this person and not punish this person when everything about you tells you that this person is a sick, evil predator and this person is an innocent, good-hearted individual? Can you even remotely conceive of that? And why would you care that somebody else can?
I got you. I understand. I feel the force of your objection. What I'm saying is, if God can judge a rapist or a murderer, what makes you think he can't judge us? I'm trying to clarify what I mean here. The thing is, even Joe Blow the neighbor, you and I, we know we do wrong. I'm saying if God is going to judge us to the letter of the law, I mean, we all have a conscience. You know when you do wrong. I know when I do wrong. That means we're still breaking some kind of moral code. I'm not talking about where it comes from.
I understand.
I'm just saying we still break it. Now, the only way, technically, if you go to what the Bible says, the only way we would pass God's criteria is, I mean, our conscience would never tell us we've done wrong. We'd be totally sinless.
Yes.
But I'm saying God has every right to judge the murderer, and I'm not going to limit him at that. He's got every right to judge Joe Blow the neighbor who has...
Why does God have this right?
Because he's God. I mean, if he's going to judge the rapist and a murderer, how are you going to tell him that he can't judge me or you?
Why
not?
How does that make him any different from a mafia boss?
What do you mean?
Well, you have, I mean, if I'm the mafia boss and I come and say, you're going to pay this much vig or I'm going to break your legs, guess what? You pay that vig and I get to judge you because I'm the boss. If you had kids, would you ever build a torture chamber in your basement and torture them endlessly if they didn't love you? Do you think...
I don't want to get to the subject of hell. I agree.
Of course you don't, because it shows the weakness of what you're saying. You're saying that God brought you into this world, he can take you out. God is the ultimate boss, and he can do with you what you want. And I say that with that kind of power comes responsibility, and it's patently absurd to go ahead and grant to some deity, whether he exists or not, that he has the right to treat the person who lied and the person who raped equally, as if they've committed equal wrongs. It's absurd, and you fundamentally know it.
I'm saying, I agree with you for the sake of argument. I'm not going to get into the subject of hell because that's a completely different subject. I'm not trying to dodge it. But what I'm saying is we can't limit God's judgment to only rapists and murderers.
I didn't ever say that. I didn't ever say that.
You're applying it. You're saying, how could a rapist or a murderer have a deathbed conversion while like me or you...
I gave a specific example that showed the high contrast. Now, let me give a slightly different...
I think you're limiting the judgment power of God. He can judge all of us.
And I say he can't judge any of us, whether he exists or not.
Okay.
There you go. I mean, if you're not going to let me, if you're not going to actually address this seriously, I didn't say that God was limited in what he could judge by those standards. I'm assuming, hey, if there is a God and he judges me by those standards, I can't tell him he can't. Obviously, he's the one with the power. He's the mafia boss who can break my legs. All I can say is I don't accept those standards. I don't find them just. I find it absurd to find anybody who claims that they're just.
I'm not saying who he can and can't judge because I don't have that power over him, except for the fact that he's a fictional being as far as I'm concerned. But what I'm saying is that if there's a person, I mean, it makes this type of system is a dictatorship, a fiat that makes all crimes, all sins, which I reject that concept, but all wrongs equal, and everybody begins with this pitiful, poor state of being worthless and in need of redemption from before they were born even, and those who don't believe the unbelievable are somehow punished. If that's the way the system actually works, and I have no reason to think that this is true, but if that's the way the system actually works, then my assessment is that it is immoral. And I don't, I'm baffled by people who could claim that it's moral. And yet people like you who don't actually come out and say, oh, it's definitely a moral system. What you do is you say, God is God. He can judge you. What a lame-ass excuse is that? If my dad beat me when I didn't do anything wrong, and your answer was, well, he's your dad. He gets to beat you. You're a dick.
That's the whole thing is, let me get this last thing in, and you can say whatever you want.
You betcha.
The whole thing, and you can tell by your own conscience, we all do something wrong. I'm not saying everything is equal. I'm not saying murder is the same deed as thinking how much you hate somebody. But what is God?
But the Bible says that.
Hold on. But what is God to do when we have thoughts like that, or we do things that we sin in our own ways? We don't have to be a Jeffrey Dahmer to be a sinner, is what I'm saying. And I'm not putting a guilt trip on you, but you know as well as I do that we're imperfect. None of us are perfect.
I never said we weren't.
Okay, but that implies we all break some kind of moral standard. That's why we're all held accountable, and that's why our actions can't get us out of it, because by nature we do these things. And that's why, and the whole story of God is not that he's going to break our legs, he sent Christ for us.
Oh, bullshit.
No,
bullshit. No, you're done. You're done. That is the biggest. That is the. No, that is the excuse. That's the mafia boss saying, "I'm going to break your legs unless." Jesus is the unless in the story.
Well, unless you pay me would be the mafia boss, and that's what Jesus would represent.
Jesus is the loophole. Jesus is the unless in the story. It does not make God moral. It does not make the biblical story become suddenly valiant and worthy of respect.
Well, in fact, killing somebody that is admittedly innocent in order to compensate for the crime someone else did.
Though, that's what I just
but
he's talking about Jesus.
Jesus.
Oh, I'm
to
sorry.
slaughter an innocent person and say, well, that's just recompense for the crap you did, that's not moral either.
Plus, it's absurd, this idea of blood sacrifice.
It is. How in the world does bleeding make somebody that did something wrong all of a sudden not
You've got this system that I say is immoral, and you think that the correction to this is for God to sacrifice himself to himself as a loophole for rules that he created that were unjust, and that this makes the rules just? That's crazy.
I think at the end of the day, we all still sin. We all know we're all imperfect. But your mafia scenario is, I don't think it's accurate. You're saying the mafia boss is saying, I'll break your legs or else.
Yeah.
I'm saying the mafia boss has every right to break your legs, but he doesn't.
Okay. Fine, you're done. I hung up.
He does.
The mafia boss does not have every right to break my legs. I'm sorry that your religion has so polluted your brain that you're unable to actually see what is immoral about what you're thinking. But that statement from you sums up everything that I tried to say 10 minutes ago. The mafia boss does not have every right to break his legs. And the moral and just thing to do is to stand up and say, no, you don't. And if somebody is asserting that they're working for a mafia boss and this mafia boss doesn't even necessarily exist and they want you to pay, which is exactly what's happening here because we have no reason to think that this God exists. I don't care if he does, this particular God that you're talking about. It doesn't matter. It's immoral. It's nonsense. It's immoral and it's nonsense. He doesn't have the right to break my legs. He doesn't have the right to judge me. And if he does so, if he happens to exist and do this, by standards that I happen to think are immoral, then he's a dick. I may not be able to do anything to stop him, but the ant can't do anything to stop me from squishing it. But it doesn't make me any less of a dick. How dare you come on here and apologize for it and shuffle actual comments that you and I both know. You know what's right and wrong. And shuffle it off as, oh, you have a conscience and you've sinned. Okay, well, that's irrelevant. We haven't even talked about that yet, about how I reject this notion of sin, or that, as Tracie pointed out earlier, that thinking something is somehow wrong. And then you come on and, no, Jesus is the excuse. Let me tell you something. According to the Bible, God basically chucked everybody into the pool and said, I got a life preserver. Anybody want to not drown? He's ultimately responsible. The story, I agree, I'm getting worked up, and it's not because I think that there's any truth to the story. It's that I'm so freaking offended and pissed off that there are people out there who take this fairy tale and make excuses for it and say that this is something good that people should be applying to their lives, or that we should make 2010 the year of the Bible. Listen to yourselves. I'm more moral than that, and so are you, and you guys need to just own it. It's insane. Ugh.
It kind of reminds me of a letter that we got a while back where somebody had, it was a guy who had a 9-month-old daughter, and I was talking to him about his daughter, and I was saying, you realize that what you're saying is that you believe that she is so unworthy that she deserves hell.
Yeah.
And we argued a little bit until he finally acknowledged that yes, that's what he had to believe, that she is deserving of hell, and that's why he wants to raise her Christian, so that she can avoid hell, because otherwise that's what God says she deserves, and that him as a Christian has to believe that. Yeah. And I'm like, and I explained to him when I wrote back, I just said, if I had a 9-month-old, I don't care if it's born without limbs, when I look at that child, I'm going to say that child is perfect. And if you can look at your baby and say, this baby is so flawed that it deserves nothing less than eternal torture, I can only hope that when she gets older, she doesn't internalize your contempt for her.
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say.
Well, it's not my contempt, it's God's contempt.
That you agree with.
Yeah.
That you happen to agree with.
Yeah,
and I mean, believe me, a child understands when, dad is saying you're not really, valuable.
I got an email here. I'm not going to read it, and I'm not going to give you the name, but it's from a 15-year-old who's having doubts about their beliefs. Let me just, if this will load, because I think I lost my internet connection. This is one sentence. I read the section about the historicity of Jesus, and I noticed half the stuff he used didn't add up to affirmations of Christ's existence. But I didn't research anything more because I'm scared. Scared out of my mind that there's a possibility that I'm wrong. And I feel like a heretic just thinking about it. Anybody who says that this simple little indoctrination is relatively harmless is a liar. You're naive. I'm not going to go as far as some other people have done, saying that all religious instruction is necessarily child abuse. I'm a fan of teaching religion, all religions, because I think it teaches us more about who we are and who other cultures are. I'm a fan of teaching the Bible because I kind of like studying the book and the history of the book and the things that are in the book. And it's useful because typically I know more about what's in the book than the people who bother calling. But when you indoctrinate someone, when you dogmatically teach someone something, when you burn it into their brains, you basically create someone who is now scared to assess the possibility that they might be mistaken for fear of torment and torture. The mafia boss analogy is not even remotely unfair. If anything, it's far too nice, because a mafia boss couldn't possibly torture anybody forever. It drives me nuts the way this stuff goes. But I picked that particular example of the rapist and the little girl because it came up on Ray Comfort's blog in the last week, and Ray, and I can't pull it up now because I lost my internet connection, but Ray's response was not any different from John's, actually, which was only mildly surprising. But Ray was like, yes, absolutely, break my heart, but she deserved it. I mean, that's really what they're saying.
Well, and the reality is there's really not much of a judgment going on.
Yeah.
He who believes and is baptized will be saved. He who believeth not shall be damned. It's not about, there is no judgment. There is no, looking at your life. Basically, it's a presumption that all human beings are worthy of whatever you think is the negative response. And to a certain degree, I would say that I don't want to say having flaws, because I see that as kind of a weird thing. I don't know that I have in my head a model of a perfect person.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would look like. But it probably wouldn't include chasing people around with whips, out of a temple. But what I do think to a certain degree is that struggling with learning and with sometimes making the wrong decision and trying to do the right thing, I see that almost as being part of being human. And it's a part of being human that I should think would be valuable, not something that should be spit on and treated like it's wrong. And to tell people that, you know, as they're working things out in their life and as they sometimes might do something that later they think, oh, there was a better way to handle this, or, you know, maybe I did a really wrong thing and I resulted in, I hit a car and I killed 3 people. I mean, sometimes we do things that we're going to carry with us for the rest of our lives. But to be telling people that there is this overblown, like, extra cosmic penalty for things that we deal with in the here and now, I just don't see the point to tormenting a person like this. And I'm just going to say that's a minor that you were reading that letter from. It's a minor. It's a minor who's scared out of his mind that what he's been told is true, and he doesn't know how he can force it. You know, he's got to keep believing it. He has to believe it. And there's so many people who have been, you know, ex-adherents who talk about that fear of, you know, I just didn't know what to think, and I just prayed and prayed and prayed, and I was so scared because I didn't want to make a mistake, and it's just drilled into them. The threat of the magnitude of the wrong choice, which would be not believing, is so drilled into the heads of these children that they're not, it's almost like they won't stop until they have some excuse to believe. And I think that's the whole point.
And in one of the most offensive moves ever, when somebody expresses that fear, or you know, one of the responses is that, well, you know, that's God, you know, trying to show you that this is wrong. This fear, this supposed conscience thing, it's reprehensible.
Well, just investigating it, doubting it is just, you know.
That's what a heretic just thinking about it. Yeah. We are closing in on not much time left, so I want to do what we can. There's only like 2 minutes left in the show. As a reminder, we'll be going to dinner after the show tonight at Threadgill's, 301 West Riverside Drive. Any atheist or atheist-friendly person is welcome to join us. You can go to the ACA website at atheist-community.org for more information about the group. You can email us at tv@atheist-community.org as well. And this will be the last show from the studio for the summer. While it's closed, we're going to take next week off. There won't be an Atheist Experience. And the following week, which is June 14th, we're going to try to do a live streamed broadcast from Dillahunty International Studios. So stay tuned for the website for more information about that. We got, is it Steve here in Austin?
Hey, how you doing?
Or is it Steve Austin?
Yeah, I'm going to let you go. We don't have much time. Thanks a lot.
Oh, all right. Sorry.
Take care.
Okay.
Okay. We've got, is it Susan in Albany, New York?
Yes, that's me.
How you doing?
Great. Good. I just wanted to comment on what I think is one of the most repugnant things about the whole idea of Jesus' sacrifice. And it seems to be an idea that's involved in what that caller was saying about how God can judge us because he has the ability to judge us. It seems to me there's this notion that because I created you, therefore I get to do whatever you want, and that my right to own you is more important than your right to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so since God supposedly created all of us, it's right that he should be able to do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
And
it's wrong for us to question
I completely agree, but we are completely out of time, Susan. I apologize. Thanks so much for calling in. There's the list of the crew. Show yourselves before we hit the summer. Thanks to everybody who tuned in and watches on the stream. We'll be going to dinner, as I mentioned. We will not be back next week. We'll be back in 2 weeks on the stream only. Send your emails, you know, try to stay tuned to the website. Thanks, Tracy. And hopefully they'll put a fan in here so it's not so damn hot.
It was warm today.
When the summer's over. We'll see you at Threadgill's. Take care.
But I still have icy hands.
Good.